in
40K
40K.
metaphysics. It's that
Yeah,
time.
40K metaphysics. A few months ago, my game club read Xenos by Dan Abnett, often called the best introductory novel for people new to 40k, and I interviewed my friend Mira, who was new to 40k, to see what she thought about that. Anyway, Dan said he'd come back to chat to the club after the release of Penitent to talk about the Bequin trilogy so far, and so Pariah and Penitent became the next books on the list. In this video, I'm going to chat to Mira again, who has now read Xenos and then jumped straight to Pariah. We'll do Penitent separately. If you don't know how these books work, this means she's skipped the rest of the Eisenhorn trilogy and all the Ravener trilogy, which is a big jump. So let's see if it still makes sense. Oh, also, spoilers? Like, obviously. Hi, Mira. How you doing? Yeah, we're going to talk about Bequin.
Yes, we are.
We're going to talk about specifically Pariah, which will be an interesting thing for you because you've come to it after basically reading Xenos.
Yes.
Skipping the rest of Eisenhorn, skipping all of Ravener.
Who's that?
And then coming straight in to the start of Bequin. So I guess the first question is like, did any of it make sense?
Honestly, a lot of it didn't make sense.
Oh.
Yeah, honestly, a lot of it didn't make sense because there were so many references to things I should have known and I didn't know them. But what kept me gripped and what kept me going through the book was the setting. And Bequin is freaking cool. There was stuff going on. There were organizations. We didn't know who was who. I love a good like noir detective thriller. I was really intrigued by different things like the Hollows. And of course, we had the Hogwarts element of a training school for special people. But I do have a list of questions. So
all right, let's do questions before we do themes then.
Okay, this is here a sampling of questions and maybe we'll come back and do more. There was a thing called a kill squad in the Hollows who were
Right.
like,
Yeah.
if you got lost in the Hollows, you were going to get like shanked by these like crazed things that had just been programmed to kill and they were worn out, old. And are they basically run down space marines?
No, they're a new thing. There's lots of individual little things in the background that talk about like Imperial Guard regiments, which are humans who are taken off to go and fight in wars, who have been augmented or given weird drugs to make them extra resistant to something. Those sort of references crop up in the background, but the are they called the Warbound in Queen Mab, which is the city where this is set. That's a sort of development and logical conclusion of that. So Dan Abnett went, okay, well, what happens to these people after the war?
So they're basically human, like Borg humans.
Yeah, they're like, I think they're humans who got cybernetically augmented for a war and then just abandoned after it.
Okay.
This is the problem, I guess, with these books. I think it's a thing specifically with these two Bequin novels, and it's something we'll touch on next time, I think, because we put this to Dan.
I don't know what I should know.
Yeah.
And what everyone knows and what everyone doesn't know. So I just assume I should know all of this because when we had our book club with Dan Abnett, all of the members of our book club, they asked him so much stuff about everything. I was like, they know everything and I'm just going to sink away under my chair.
And that's exactly the problem, that there is a load of things in these novels, way more than in any other novels in this extended series, that are things from the 40k world that you're kind of expected to know.
Yeah.
But there are also loads of things that have been invented, like any Dan Abnett book. He's made up loads of stuff that fits in the world that's new. And yeah, the Warbound, the Hollows, that war they were fighting in, all of that's new.
Okay. Look at my rainbow pencil that I've made notes on the wall with.
Particularly good, I like it. It's the correct month for the rainbow pencil. So,
yay, pride. Who is Death Row? He is a famous thing, right?
No, he's also invented for that novel.
Flipping heck.
Yeah.
Okay, he had his name on his helmet. Like, he's got to be in the film. You're like, oh, it's Death Row.
No, he's completely invented for that novel. There is a reveal to Death Row in the following book where you find out what he is. But no, he's not a pre-existing character.
Okay. Also, the reveal to who Death Row was, minimal impact for me.
I know, right?
So, the Cursed. Is that a thing?
No, that's also invented.
Okay, all right. When they're talking about how Bequin goes out spying, part of her job is we took on roles, immersed ourselves in other personalities so we could get close to citizens, blah, blah, blah. So one example was work in the court of Mamselle R and bring back a single pearl button from her finest Asterish gown. Is Aster a place we should know? Yay, okay, great.
No, all made up for this. I think almost all the Society of Queen Mab is invented for this. And it's part of that like Gothic Victorian world building he's decided to do for these novels.
Okay, next question. I've just written this note. Do all Space Marines look like this? But I can't see the page it's attached to.
There is a thing where Space Marines, it's more of a Horus Heresy books thing where they have a lot of humans interacting with Space Marines. But one of the things about Space Marines is they all kind of tend to look alike because the implants gigantize them. So all their faces are slightly too wide and all their bodies are slightly too wide and they all end up looking very similar.
That's why they're all massive.
Yeah. Like, there's a load of implants that make them really big, but because it does it on the base of like child, like a 10-year-old, they all end up looking really similar because they've all been grown in the same way.
That makes sense. Oh, Astartes. So the gown was Astartidus. That was the connection.
Oh, that might be a connection. It might be like a random connection because Astartes just means of the stars.
Okay. I really want to see the fashion design of that gown.
So more than many books, this is the one where I really wanted to see what they actually look like.
Yes.
It has this brilliant like Victorian governess. The reason we did this is because Dan, when we went, we can't show you any of this because it's private video, but when we
Hate Club only, soz.
Yeah, I know, sorry. When we did the first one, Dan said Pariah had been published, but Penitent hadn't. And Dan said he'd come back to the club and have a little chat with everybody to talk about Penitent and Pariah once Penitent was out. And in that conversation, there was a really interesting thing where he was talking about having the confidence to write a novel like this in the 40k setting. This novel is obviously very Dickensian, very Mervyn Peake, Gothic Victorian sort of novel.
Gormenghast.
Yeah, Gormenghasty.
Yeah.
And being at a position where you can go, you know what, I'm going to write a Victorian Gothic novel in Warhammer. And also someone might be writing a hard sci-fi in Warhammer and someone else might be writing a spirit quest in Warhammer. The point where you can go, you know what, the setting is big enough to take a Victorian Gothic novel. And so in more than anything in this, I was like, this setting is really interesting. And I really wish I saw what they all look like.
And they even had like the spiritualist setting that were so famous in Victoriana. They even had the little doll mannequins. There was even ghosts. It was like, so I'm going to ask you, because I wrote down, do they all look like this? So the description of the traitor Marines is huge armor-plated shoulders bulging aggressively, obviously. Chin jutted forward, eyes blazing, clad in crimson armor with gunmetal edges and black emblems upon the bar shoulder shields. The one without the helmet had flesh like cracked bread crust and slate grey teeth the shape of iron nails that filled his mouth and jutted forward past his peeled back lips as he raged. So they are traitor Marines. So do all Space Marines have that kind of cracked bread, iron teeth, or is that because they're traitors, or is that just a Dan Abnett style thing?
I guess I'd say that was a common description of Chaos Marines. But because 40k is quite dark, you'd probably find that there's probably loyalist Marine chapters that look a bit like that anyway.
Yeah.
Like there probably are some really barbaric loyalist Marine chapters. The whole way Space Marines work is there's thousands of these chapters. They're all very small and they all have cultures from their home world, and their home worlds are often primitive worlds.
Yeah.
So the idea of like a loyalist Space Marine chapter who, I don't know, engage in ritual blood drinking is kind of weirdly normal. And there's like a big grey area between that and a chaos evil Space Marine chapter who eat people.
Okay. And you are a Chaos Marine if you've been affected by the warp and you're into like crazy shit?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, basically, yeah. You're a Chaos Marine if you turned away from the Imperium.
Yes, away
and,
from
and it's another grey area in Warhammer where there are Chaos Marines who swore their service to Chaos gods in return for weird powers, like the red armored ones of Word Bearers. And there are other Marines who just decided not to serve the Imperium anymore and became sort of lone agents who probably aren't that into chaos. But as far as the Imperium are concerned, same fucking thing.
So is that a bit like Eisenhorn? He was like, I don't know who to serve anymore. Oh my God, I'm learning.
There's a huge grey area and it comes to the basis that the Imperium is really bad.
Yeah.
So you've got chaos that's really, really bad and the Imperium that's really bad. And everyone who tries to take a point in the middle, as far as the Imperium are concerned, they might as well be chaos. They're heretics.
Got it.
And that's kind of the central tension of every character in 40k.
And then my last question is, because we can get on to the meat of it. I learned from one of your videos that the whole Warhammer thing, 38,000 years in the future.
Yeah.
How can there be a reference to the CCP And how did that survive? And how do they know? And they're talking about, that this is the old Franco language. So we are led to believe that that language has lasted that long. That kind of blew my mind.
Or it's like ancient history that someone in a privileged... I think there's a lot of this. And you get this a little bit in some of the Horus Heresy books. One of the Horus Heresy books starts with a quote from Hamlet, except it's transcribed as Hamnet, Prince of the Mark, by the revered M2 poet Shakespeare. So you have to assume that all these references to like an ancient Frankish language or Shakespeare or things like that are how we refer to the Iliad.
That makes sense. It's like the Book of Dave, which is where a future generation finds a diary of a cab driver. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But that's the idea. And the reason for this, essentially, is that I guess not too far in our future, maybe 8 or 10,000 years in our future, which is enough, which is the sort of distance that we would remember the Hammurabi's Book of Laws or ancient Egypt. That far in our future, in an age like today where we have records, people went out and seeded the stars, and some of those planets retain that knowledge, even though for the rest of the galaxy it was lost.
Yeah, okay.
So there might be some planet in the world that was colonized by people who spoke French, or something like a few thousand years away from French now.
Yeah.
And then the warp storm started and they got lost and no one contacted them for 20,000 years.
But they still retained everything.
Or some of it, or it evolved, or it got mixed with things. And enough that in Warhammer 40k, they couldn't really piece together anything from our time, but there are these weird things that still exist from it.
Like echoes of the past. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing. You have been playing role-playing games recently, I heard.
I have. In lockdown, I started playing D&D for the first time since I was 20.
Yay, we got you. I just thought the characters were so well realised in this book. I could imagine playing them. And they all have different abilities, and I could see different classes in there. You have like the fighter, you have like, the rogue. But also I realised through reading this book, nobody who plays Warhammer can be expected to know everything about Warhammer. And most people who play Warhammer that I've observed have a really fun war game, have a drink of beer and just get on with it. Whereas because I'm approaching it from like an outside view and I'm learning so much, there is so much immense history. But my question is, Ian, it's not that book related. Do you think people can just enjoy Warhammer on the basis of just playing it and knowing nothing of any of the legend?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There are people who are much more focused in playing the game. If you're looking for a really good game, I would suggest, just purely on the basis of gameplay, I'd suggest Warhammer isn't it.
Yeah, Dungeons
and Dragons. There are obviously Dungeons and Dragons is it. Arguably, Frostgrave is a better written game than Warhammer.
Yay, props to Frostgrave.
There are people who don't really care about the background and just want to play the game, but I think they're probably massively outnumbered by people who really, really are interested in the background and never get to play many games very often.
That complexity of the amount of options you can have, like when I watch your videos about how you're going to pick who your armies are going to be and stuff, not only is there so much choice, but then you need that rule set to cover anything anyone wants to pick out. Like, come on, I still use my player's handbook for D&D and I've been playing that for years.
It's like a central issue of their own making, right?
Well, yeah, thank you for that little cul-de-sac there, but I really...
So last time we did this, we spoke about Elizabeth Bequin and how obviously in Xenos, her character arc is a little cliched, tropey. And interestingly, we put this to Dan, who was like, yeah, it is. I wouldn't write it the same way nowadays.
No, that was really great to hear. I mean, at the time we were talking about Bequin, and obviously I really enjoyed seeing a woman featured in a novel of that era who was kind of like not integral to the plot, but had her place and was useful. But also there was the damsel in distress trope. And it was really interesting to hear Dan, kind of just saying how, as he's kind of grown as a writer and society's kind of changed a lot, she would have been written differently. And don't you see this as his hats off, this is full force Bequin? Yeah,
you're going to be in the same position of me as this because you've only read Xenos, and Xenos is also the bit where you get the origin story of Bequin.
Yes.
So I spend the first 2/3 of this book going, who the fuck is this?
I'm so glad you said that because I had a question.
Because you go into it going, okay, so is this like a story of Bequin? Is this set when Bequin was young? Because I've just... In Xenos, it tells you what she did when she was young, and it wasn't this. There was a bit of me that was like going, is this comatose Bequin? Is this her having a psychic episode? Is this because Queen Mab is such a weird place, and it's quite far into the book that you realize the spoilers, it's that she is a clone brought up to think she's an Imperial servant.
Because we're rereading it to talk about it again, in the first 4 pages, she says, I am Beta, pronounced Beta, e.g. Alpha was the one that we read about in Xenos, and Beta is the clone.
I didn't pick up on that, but I guess, second reread, you totally
Beta. And he even writes in the copy, it's pronounced Beta.
Yeah.
So I was like, and I kind of love the book for that I could reread it again and get so much more out of it. And I think the first time I read through the book, I was racing because the plot is like, what's going to happen? And then going back and just appreciating all the little details. I just kind of read out the descriptions of the scary Marines and the descriptions of the different spy things. It's really, really gorgeously written. You can really lose yourself in that universe.
So it's first person. Eisenhorn was first person.
Yeah.
Ravener isn't first person. Ravener's much more of an ensemble, as you might have guessed from seeing how that group works.
Yeah, they're like the A-team.
Yeah, they really are. And then this comes back to a single voice. And that voice is written like a Victorian novel. She has certain speech patterns and stylings that are not modern.
No, and it was great. I mean, I know that with the last time we spoke, what I really loved about Xenos was that the setting was, oh my gosh, that you can see the different worlds. So we had the planet of iced people, and then we had sumptuous embassy rooms, and then we had the whoa, what's going on planet. I know that you were kind of thinking, well, what is Mira going to make of this setting?
Yeah, it's all in one place.
And because it's so amazingly beautifully fleshed out, and it has portals and things can pop in and out. And it just really felt so well realized. I could literally see the school she was training in. When there were fights going on, they were written so well. I just absolutely loved the setting. Not that I'd want to hang out there, but I just thought it was wonderful, and I'd love to read more books set in that universe. What did you think?
I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed it because it wasn't what I expected. This weird Gothic London place.
Yeah.
And I did keep wondering if it would go somewhere else. The setting is really familiar, like much of 40K, weirdly familiar.
Yeah.
If you've read any Dickens, you know what this is. If you've read Gormenghast, you know what this is. Everyone knows this world of Victorian Gothic, so that we can live in that world and appreciate the weird 40K elements of it, like the Warbound or the Hollows or things like that. There was this campaign hundreds of years ago that means whole areas of the city are now sacred and can't be gone into, which is a really 40K idea. I really liked exploring that place, and I was quite happy to sit in Queen Mab for the whole novel.
Did you miss the epic nature of a space battle or starships or anything? I didn't.
I rarely care if those are in 40K novels anyway. I really like the background novels.
I think the beauty of a Dan Abnett book, with my limited experience, is that you literally fall in love with the characters and the settings. And that's kind of all I need to be absorbed into a novel. But I did wonder, if you're a proper hardcore gamer and your heart is full of the lore and the history, would you read this and think, oh, I wish they'd had more kind of I don't know, spaceships?
I don't know, I've read enough books about Space Marines. There's an interesting corollary to that, though. One of the interesting things of it is obviously you're in Beta's head for most of it.
Yeah.
And you're at most with the 1, maybe 2 people she's around. And so there's a really interesting thing when forces like Eisenhorn or Ravener's gang come into it. They feel very much like weird outside forces.
Yeah, they don't fit, do they?
And that's a really interesting thing for me, because obviously I've read both those trilogies, so I know all those characters, and it's very interesting to see them from the point of view of, I want to say a normal person of the Imperium. Beta's not a normal person of the Imperium, but certainly someone who is there's this weird woman floating blades around with her brain. Having never read any of the Ravener books, and also not getting to the point in Eisenhorn where Ravener's in it, how was encountering all those people?
It was quite thrilling, because just like Beta didn't know who they were, I didn't know who they were, and I didn't know which faction to trust. I don't know if this is the first or the second book of the trilogy, but knowing that there were 2 opposing forces, and I obviously in Xenos I really liked Eisenhorn. I was hoping he would be the goodie, but I don't know. because I need to read more about him. Yeah, I think it added to me and my experience of understanding how Beta was. She's meeting these really powerful, patriarchal types, and they need her, and she has to kind of figure out who she's going to trust. One question I guess I had, so we have these really well-known characters. If we look at the whole universe, how close are they to, like, because obviously the Imperium is this huge thing. So is it like these two people could bring down the whole empire? Or is it just like, well, this is District 9 of 700 million thousand districts, and it's a tiny story playing out that may not matter at all?
Yeah, it's that.
It's that. Okay, I'm glad I haven't wasted my time. Good. But it's just, that's what's mind-blowing to me. It's like a tiny chunk of something crazy and huge, and I actually really care about it.
It's interesting where it goes. When we talk about Penitent, it goes to a point where it like becomes galactic scale. But at this point, and certainly the entire Eisenhorn Ravena trilogy, yeah, they're fighting things that could be really bad, could kill planets. But you're talking about an Imperium of 1 million planets.
Yeah. Are there any books that deal with the very heart of, like, the Emperor and the Sons and the Renegade Son?
The Horus Heresy series is probably the best bet for that. That like series does a really nice balance between dealing with the big events and why they happen, which are difficult to write. Some of those books are the worst books because it's very hard to write gods and demigods. They just always end up feeling like stupid humans. And then the other half of the book, the other half of that series is people who got caught up in it, which is a much better half of the series. Yeah. And I guess one of the themes of 40k is that the Imperium is so big that there's almost nothing in it. Very rarely is there anything in it that actually threatens the whole of the Imperium.
Yeah.
There's some really modern novels where like the cusp of where the timeline is pushing forward, which are very like, someone new has come and we're going to save the galaxy.
Maybe we'll need to read some of those Horus Heresy books together. Yeah.
There's been a request in the comments already, like going, Mira has to read the first 4 Horus Heresy books.
I'll do it if you do it with me.
Okay. Maybe that's the next thing we do. Shouldn't we work at least vaguely through the Eisenhorn Xenos thing?
Yeah, because I think I really like Eisenhorn. I'm not sure how I feel about Ravena yet. I don't know enough about them.
Ravena feels very different. I would say that of the 3 trilogies, Ravena's my least favorite. If Eisenhorn's a detective novel and Bequin is like a Victorian Gothic mystery, then Ravena is much more like a modern sci-fi action movie.
Okay, can I ask one more question? I'm sorry. The whole thing with her being a psychica, and being live or dead. So when she was at her full power, people feel sick. How does that work?
Okay, so 40k metaphysics.
Yay! 40k metaphysics. It's that time.
40k metaphysics. Right. In the world of Warhammer 40k, there's a way in which they rationalize scientifically religion, but in a way that makes it a sort of alternate dimension set of physics.
Got it.
Physics we don't understand, rather than what any modern religion would say. And the way that generally works is there's an alternate dimension called the warp. It's made up of emotional energy from sentient humans in real space. So essentially your little spark of emotional energy that exists in the warp with you is what we would now call your soul.
Oh, I love that.
Right? And some people have a better connection to the warp, and they can pull some power out of the warp and use it to change the real world. And that's called psychic power, which is also magic, basically. Like that's what magic always was.
Got it.
The danger in it is that things live in the warp, and when you open a portal to them, they might get in you. So what Bequin's a pariah or a null. She's the opposite. So she's a human that is born without that spark. She has nothing where the spark of humanity should be. She's like a void.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's really sad. Since every human has a little bit of that spark, and she has a gaping void where that spark should be, she is naturally very off-putting to other humans. Psychers in the presence of pariahs, nulls, freak out. It's a horrible, horrible experience for them to be near them. And you get a little bit of that, I think, in Xenos. Like the astropath Loink really dislikes the fact that Beta's on board.
Yes.
Because it fucks up all of his psychic abilities to speak to people. And it means that anyone who is a null generally ends up being like disassociated from society and has a very hard time making any connections, because humans don't know why they hate her, but they do.
But luckily Beta was kind of weaponized almost to use.
And this is an Abnett invention, is the idea that you can take these nulls and train them to be even more nully, and then give them a handy piece of magic technology that just turns it off when they don't want to be. Oh, you've just got a limiter. You just turn on the limiter, you're a normal person again. So we've been through a few things. I hope I've answered any outstanding questions?
If anybody watching does feel like we could have covered more Pariah, or they want to know more about other bits that we didn't cover, what we thought about, they can ask us, can't they? In comments. We'll see what we can do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mira. We'll get to Penitent in a little bit.
Yay.
Cool.
Thanks, Ian.